Welcome back, everybody. This is really an exciting time for us because we are in the middle of Nonprofit Power Week, and we have Jill Crumbacher, who's rejoining us. She's the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Development. I'm going to get back into that because that's just awesome, of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. Hey, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. It's good to be here again.
Well, we're really excited to have this conversation with you to get some clarity. I'm not excited about the topic, and that's communications in a politically charged era. Who thought that we would be here talking about these things? But we do need to have an honest conversation about this because so many nonprofits across our nation are really conflicted in being, I would say, injured, Joe, by some things that are bouncing back onto them, which they never anticipated because of a different climate in our country. So we want to really get into that with you and get your feedback. We get to have these conversations that are honest and sometimes tough because we have presenting sponsors that believe in us. And they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Holdings Nonprofit Bank, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and JMT Consulting. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. Okay, but more importantly, Jill Crumbacher, as I mentioned, she's the Senior Vice President with the amazing Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. And we're going to do a whole episode about this, but if you look at that title, what's so amazing is that Jill leads not only the marketing, but the development teams. And I just think it's such an innovative thing. Jill, when we first met you several years ago, you were doing this. And at the time, I think you were the only person I had ever seen do this type of work. And so I'm so honored to have you with us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I love doing both. We'll talk about that as we move forward this week.
Absolutely. It's really a cool thing. And I think because you do both of these, you lead both of these teams, you are the perfect person to be talking about this issue of a changing climate and in terms of our communications. And so let's get right into it and ask the question, is foster care and adoption and the issues that surround it, are they politically charged?
There is some political charge now. For a lot of years, we said, and to some degree, there's still some truth to it, that we enjoy respect and good working relationships with both sides of the aisle. And, we work with states, with Republicans in office, with Democrats in office, because foster care adoption was something that one of the rare things people could agree on. And largely, there is still some truth to that. However, we have seen a shift, as a lot of nonprofits have seen, in the fact that this topic does also become political. And just from a high level, those two issues seem to be, for us, like we experienced it when the Dobbs decision came in regarding abortion. And that is not something central to the issue of foster care, but a lot of people don't understand that. And so people tried to draw us into that conversation that we felt largely wasn't ours. But also in the foster care system, we are involved in the back end, at the end of the process for a youth, right? When a judge has already decided that they can't go home. And so we're looking at getting them a permanent family, where there's a lot of political conversation is the front end of the system. Why is a child coming into foster care? And a lot of very valid concerns about pulling children out due to poverty or racism or things like that. And those are very valid concerns. But sometimes you can get pulled into this, well, you're trying to find adoptive for, family for a child that never should have been in the system, right? So that's sort of the conversations that you find yourself in.
So I want to go back to something you said at the very beginning, which I hadn't really observed this with your foundation. But help me understand, you really are looking at this, as you said, at the end, and not at the end of the journey, but the end of maybe the legal process.
Yes.
And not engaging in the causes of the scourge.
Correct. And so we have really determined, our founder asked us to get children adopted. And that, as a child enters foster care, the whole point of foster care is to be temporary and for that child to go back home to their original family. That is the way it is supposed to work. That's how we want it to work. We want those families to be able to heal, to be able to do any work that they need to do to have those children go back. So that's what we want. But unfortunately, some can't. And when you're talking about abuse and neglect, that is true abuse and neglect, some shouldn't.
Right.
And that is where then we come in at the end of that process, where a judge has already decided, the family's been worked with, and a judge has decided that that child sadly cannot go back to their first family. And that's a crisis for that child and that family. But then our part is to come in and find them a permanent family so that they don't age out of the system with no family.
Right. Do you spend time on educating or explaining this issue, this, I don't want to use the word separation necessarily, but this mission alignment to that part of the journey that you all are engaged in?
Yes, we try to. We have our language down really tight because, in a topic like this, sometimes we feel like, well, everyone understands cancer. Maybe they don't, but you kind of get it, like cognitively. You get, what the issue is there. In foster care, people don't understand it as well and what it works. So we've always had that added degree of having to educate as we're building awareness. And so we have our language down pretty tight to try to do that quickly, because you can't go on paragraphs and paragraphs in those communications, right? So we try to paint that picture of, this is how many are in care, this is how many won't go home, this is what we're trying to do, and try to paint that in a really short amount of time.
Well, I'm struck by that amazing poster behind you that has 3 words: finding forever families.
Yes.
It's very succinct, but yeah, I mean, I think the way you've couched for forever and families together, it kind of, if you think about it, you realize it's not their biological family.
That's right.
Right. I mean,
right. And you want it to be. We want it to be like that, right?
Yeah.
But for some youth, they can't see that.
Sure. So fascinating. Well, thank you for explaining that to me. And I want to then take that foundation of understanding how your work is impacting a stage of a journey. How many communication strategies do you manage? Because we talked about this briefly about partnerships with you, and you have things that are internal, you have things that are external, you have things for fundraisers. I mean, I could go on and on and on. So how many communication strategies then are you amplifying your message maybe differently?
As the years go on, we get more and more. We get more sophisticated. We get more laser focused on specific audiences and making those communication streams even more direct and unique to who we're talking to. So, at a 30,000 feet level, we have 2 main audiences. We have the public and we have child welfare workers that we're talking to. Within that first one, we have the most diversification. So we'll talk to just in general to the mass public, right? And that might be billboards or social media ads or social media, things like that, right? We have people then who follow us where we go a little deeper into the work. And then we have people who take the next step, donors. This is, again, one of the reasons why we're combined. We just see it as all one big communication strategy. We have donors. And then within donors, you're talking to donors who've been there a long time, brand new donors who stepped away and came back, donors associated with people who love Wendy's, people who aren't coming in because of that. And so as the years go by, we get even more sort of laser focused in drawing out and segmenting those lists. Our comms calendar is beautifully organized chaos of all of the comms that are going out, who's on that list, who's being suppressed from that list, when it's going out, so it's you have to be extremely organized and working ahead to know when all of these messages are going to land to different folks and what you're going to say to this one that you're not going to say to that one, right? So. Wow. It's complicated, and you need a larger staff to be able to to do that.
Right. Do you find that over the trajectory of your career, these communication groups are changing or morphing, and you're having to try and nuance things? Because as we were talking about, that it is a politically charged environment, but we have aging demographics, we have changing demographics. I mean, are those groups pretty like set it and forget it, or are you having to kind of finesse those groups as you move along?
We, as we go along, and as we watch the landscape, and as we see comments on social media, or wherever you're getting feedback from people, we have got our messaging down pretty tight. In that we say this way, and we say it this way for a reason.
Yeah,
and we have a very long list of things we say this way and not that way. So for staff that come in that are new to our comms team, they aren't going to feel fully ready for quite a while. They have a lot to study. They have a lot to learn. It's not a short list. It's a long list of all the reasons why we say certain things certain ways. So, and that has come through, I would say there's less segmentation of the audiences, because there's a lot of overlap and there's channels that can get out to different folks, right? We don't, but more so very focused on how we say things. There is a little bit of change in how we talk to the public versus child welfare, though. For the public, we use the word adoption heavily. Who knew that we couldn't say the word adoption? But politically, we for child welfare, we use the word permanency. Because child welfare is concerned with either an adoptive family or a legal guardianship or reunification to the original family, which again is what we all want. So we want a permanent family for that child, whether or not it's adoptive. So we do use different words. That's probably the best example of a key strategic word for us, Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, that we finesse for the child welfare audience.
That is absolutely fascinating, because permanency is a very powerful word. I think it communicates so many different things. And so that's absolutely fascinating. Now, when I'm going to ask you to go in the time machine back, when Mr. Thomas decided that this was what he wanted, a big part of his legacy, was the foster care system a part of the dialogue? Was it an active thing? And because I asked that question because of the changing times in our country, and it seems to me like you all as an organization are really leaning into that.
Right.
How has that really impacted you?
Right. So, when Mr. Thomas set up the foundation, he did focus on foster care, but he also took a little bit broader approach, which some of our programs still do today as well. One of the first initiatives he did was make sure adoption benefits were in the workplace, for instance, and that goes across all kinds of adoption. You're not just going to work on one, right? You work on all of them. So he had a passion and a love for all the types of adoption, but our mission is specifically focused on making sure when we're measuring ourselves, we're looking at foster care adoption specifically. And that's just been the area that we've decided to be really, really laser focused on. We feel like in order to make change, we have to focus on one specific area, and we really wanted to make change in that area.
That's absolutely fascinating, because to an outsider, I wouldn't have recognized that nuance, right? But now that you're articulating it, I can see kind of with the work that you all do and your messaging and the things that I see. That's really interesting. Now, when you think about this, and as you mentioned, the political nature of this, you would think, how could this become part of a discussion? What all have you done? What all are you doing to, I don't want to use the word insulate necessarily, but to kind of keep moving your work ahead without diverting your attention. I thought it's fascinating you talked about the Dobbs decision and how that could have easily derailed so much of your work.
Yes.
How have you navigated this?
Well, one of the things we've done is we decide what conversation we're going to get into and what we're not. Just because a reporter calls you doesn't mean you have to reply. Or you can give them an answer that says, this is not our conversation, and here's why this isn't our conversation. So you have to be very thoughtful. We worked ahead of this. We met with a crisis comms firm long before this issue ever came up. And we actually drew up a document of, here's all the arrows we feel like could ever come at us that we know of right now. And if we ever get caught in a conversation about these things, here's how we're going to answer each one of these issues. But we're not just going to answer each one. We're going to be really thoughtful about, if we're going to get into this conversation. But we had thought years before about all of the arrows that we could see that could come at us about what was changing in the political realm or just in the world or in the country. Here's all the things that could we can get pulled into an immigration conversation and the children who are, without families at the border, but that they're not in foster care. We can have an opinion on that. That's not necessarily our work. So there's tons of issues. And my best advice, I think what we've done is we worked ahead. And we had a living document that we would go in and update every so often as a new topic. Okay, if we had to talk about this, what would we say? Here's our long answer and here's our short answer. But then when the topic comes at us, being really thoughtful about if we're even going to engage in it. And in the moment when the reporters are calling, that's not the time to figure out what you would say if you choose to do so.
Wow. Okay. So I'm just going to woman up and say that might be the golden nugget of this entire Nonprofit Power Week, because that's super brilliant, especially with an organization with the size of yours and how you are throughout North America. That's a pretty heavy lift, right?
It is. All the issues that you could see coming. We also sent all of our materials out to a different third party and said, do you see anything in the way we say things that could be misconstrued? Any target, these words that we don't see in our industry, but could pique someone's criticism in another industry, right? And so they wrote it all up. Some of it, we took their advice and we changed, and some of it we said, nope, we're not changing that, and there's a reason why we don't change that particular thing. That's the other part of this. We have tried to remain really central to a mission. We say things, we've thought about how we say them. We say it that way on purpose. We've planned out how we would handle crisis topics if they come up. And then we also talk about which things are we, even if that becomes a really issue of hatred towards us, that we're not going to change because that's our mission. Think about it now. Don't think about it when you've got 20 reporters calling you and you're sweating and you feel scared or people are attacking you all over social media or something goes viral. That's not the time. You have to take the time to think about it before it's your reality as best as you can. Some things will take you by surprise.
Sure. But I've got to believe that it's got to be somewhat heartbreaking to think that you get attacked when you think, and as I do believe for you and your organization, you're doing the work of the angels. And then it's like, things are coming at you just because they're salacious or there's an opportunity to create to spark up some upset.
That's right.
And that's just got to be grueling for you managing yourself and then frankly your team, like how you navigate that. So let's talk about this a little bit more. What works and what's volatile. When you went through this exercise, did you ever think some of these things would come to pass, or has it been a swirl of new things? Like, I guess my question is, how much did this arm you for thinking about things in a different way?
it armed us a lot, and it forced us to have those conversations and make some of the decisions. But I think we hoped a lot of them wouldn't come our way. But it's really important that you're watching the landscape. You're not only watching your industry, if you will, and your topic, but the other hot button topics that are happening out there. We all know, if you turn on the news, you know what they are. Is there any link? Is there any connection of what somebody can make to ours? And so you just have to constantly be watching that landscape. You know what those hot button issues are if you're keeping your eyes open, and you, as somebody in charge of the communications of an organization, that's your job, is to be watching and to be sharing. My team is constantly sending, hey, I saw this, right? I saw this in the news. This is how it might affect us. It might come at us this way. 9.9 out of 10 never come our way.
Yeah.
But occasionally they do. And the Dobbs issue is one. And sometimes, even if you feel like it's not your issue, people want to use you and use your voice, right, to take their side. And that's what they're hoping for. So I think just watching the general landscape of hot buttons and being aware and calling in experts when you need to call in experts to do that work, to be prepared.
Wow. Okay. So that's pretty damn good, because in not even 3 minutes, you gave me 2 huge nuggets. And I would have never actually thought in a strategic way to look at what the hot buttons are and see if there are any links to what your work is. That's genius, because that also, to me, Jill, shows me that you're keeping consistent, or not, you're keeping current with new arrows that can be slung at you, right?
Yes.
That's so smart.
Yes. I think you have to do that in a comms role in an organization that's growing large enough, right? Where people are going to start calling you or asking for your opinion or making comments on social media. So, issues like immigration, issues like abortion, issues like poverty, issues like racism, all of those can connect to the child welfare system in some way. And so we have to keep our eyes open to all of them. Even though we know we don't necessarily work in those channels, other people will think we do or want us to have an opinion on those things. Right? Yeah. So a good comms person has to be as much offense as defense.
Yeah, absolutely. Such an interesting part of this conversation that I didn't actually think about those 2 big elements that you've brought up of being prepared, figuring out what logical and timely responses are. I mean, we know that in the back of our minds, but I mean, really coming up with plans, even if they might seem far-fetched at the time. Right. And then understanding potential links to the hot button issues, I think, is just masterful. There's a reason, my friend, why you're leading these 2 teams, huh? There definitely is. Okay, you talked about this, and we don't have a lot of time left, but I really want to dig down into using different language, educating your team, which is a significant size. I know, just with some work that I do in my community that is DEI based, we had to go through and really change vocabulary. And it's heartbreaking, because that's been our focus, right? And how have you managed that? Because I feel like your organization, the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, has always been a leading voice in the different types of family structures and the different types of families that can be created and step up, or, be successful and offer this forever home.
Right.
How have you navigated this?
That falls into one of the areas where we decided long ago in this, pre-planning of what could come our way, of what we weren't willing to give up.
Oh, okay.
So we talked about, we can give on this, we can give on that, but we will celebrate all children and will advocate for all children in the system, regardless of how they identify. And we also advocate for all families, and in all the ways that those legally form, right? And so that is one of those issues that we're not willing to give it up. That said, I think we try to remain central. One of the things that we've done here is we are who we are every single day, every day of the year. The imagery that you're going to see for us is going to be very consistent. What we don't do, we also don't try to poke, though.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting way to phrase it.
We don't try to poke or ignite. We are very consistent with who we are day in and day out. The imagery you're going to see from us, the kinds of families you're going to see from us, the words that we're using are always that way. We don't dial it up in a certain month necessarily or another, right? We don't poke in that way. We simply have chosen to be who we are every single day of the year in an equal way, so that never changes about us. So there might be a sort of a center or softness to that, but I think it goes back to deciding what you can't give up. And if we get criticized for being that, and we have been criticized, for that, then those aren't the people that are going to want to support our organization, and that's okay.
This just popped into my head, this question, and that is, when you have been criticized, have you seen a spike in support in other ways? I know sometimes that, in the dark hours of politically charged commentary, and that you find yourself in the middle of a storm, it actually has there's a reaction from different communities. Have you experienced that at all?
Yeah, we have, and we see that play out mostly. Thankfully, our public criticism has been fairly small. We've had some over billboards that we've had out, or different things. We've had some, but for the most part, it's been pretty small. But you'll see it play out on social media. Probably is the most typical place where someone will criticize and someone else in the community will come in and stick up for us, right? And we don't even have to do that. The community sort of solves that problem, and I think we see that a lot on social media, sort of the community of followers handling each other.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, and I also think that's far more powerful, right? I mean,
absolutely.
The value of that is just so immeasurable. So, it's kind of an interesting thing. I was thinking about that. I told you the story yesterday of driving to a meeting in a part of town that I wasn't completely familiar with, and coming upon your billboard. Which was in my eyes, it was just massive. It was a huge billboard. It wasn't like a tiny little thing. And, it was a very diverse family, and it was super cool to see that, because I think it articulated that the typical American family is not the same for everyone. Right.
Right.
It was really cool to see. It was really, really neat to see. Talking about these things with you has been riveting, and I'm so appreciative of your transparency. We realize that the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption is a very large structure, but I find that your lessons have been very achievable for a lot of different sized organizations, and so I'm very honored that you would share kind of this inside work. I think a lot of us in the nonprofit sector, it would take us years of trial and error to get to so many of these best practices that you all have done over years. It's not like it just popped out, but
you learn as you go. And other organizations, I've picked up the phone and called them, and I find the nonprofit community to just be very supportive, learning from each other, learn from others that are one step ahead of you, right? And they're willing to talk to you. I have found them to be so helpful in us as we've come across our journey. So
and that's a wonderful thing, to always be able to give back and share your lessons. Jill Crumbacher, Senior Vice President of Marketing and Development for the amazing Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. You can learn more about their tremendous work. And I would say, Jill, beautiful work. There's two different things. You can do good work and have really an important mission, or you can do it beautifully and execute it with just an amazing degree of consistency and branding. And you all do that. If you ever want a masterclass on how to really take a theme and move it forward, you've got to check out the davethomasfoundation.org website. You will see masterful work at structuring communications. And what a great thing to have you on with us, Jill, for Nonprofit Power Week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun, and it continues to be a lot of fun because we've talked about how you navigate partnerships. We're going to be talking with the CEO, Rita Sornin, about how to boost board engagement. This is a big issue post-pandemic. A lot of folks don't want to come back to the board table. They just want to sit in front of their cameras. Again, we talked with Jill today about, dealing with comms in a time which is fraught with a little bit of civil discourse. We're going to be talking about this issue of combining marketing and development. Super powerful. Don't miss that. And then what the foundation sees trending in 2026. And that we will be rejoined with the CEO herself of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, Rita L. Sorn, and it'll be a very exciting way for us to wrap up our week. We are delighted to be here each and every day because we have presenting sponsors that believe in us. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Holdings Nonprofit Banking, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and JMT Consulting. These are the folks that are with us day in and day out. Jill, we have this mantra that we say at the end of each week or each episode. And today I'm thinking about it in the long term and the short term in a very different way. And it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again.